Here we go. Okay, so we have done a lot of looking at women's issues in prayer. We talked about minyan, we talked about separate seating, we talked about Kaddish, Tefillin, Talis, Aliyah. We talked about all of the issues that relate to Jewish women in shul. And today, before we move on, we're going to discuss the women of the wall at some point, because I had a request to discuss that issue. I'd be happy to do that. We might get to that today, but before we do that, there's one more aspect of women in prayer that we have to really discuss, because this is a very popular prayer, a very popular blessing. It's really one blessing, and everybody knows it. Everyone knows it because it's typically used against the Jewish religion, the Jewish philosophy, or Judaism in general, as proof that Judaism considers women second-class citizens. And that is the blessing that men say in the morning. Thank you, God, for not making me a woman. Okay. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher shelo asani isha. Thank you for not making me a woman. So we have to discuss this. All right. It is something that has been fraught with misunderstanding, but on the surface of it, it looks pretty clear, right? It seems to be this is like the litmus test of Judaism is misogynistic, and clearly it's evidence that the Torah is against women. It's negative to be a woman. There's something inherently bad or evil or lesser than in being a woman. Well, otherwise, why would a man say, thank you, God, for not making me one? Okay? Plus, women, what do women say? Instead of not making me thank you for not making me a woman, they say, thank you for making me according to your will. And this is taken to mean, it's taken to be a passive sort of resigning ourselves to our fate as a second-class citizen. So we have to really look at this bracha, and this is going, hopefully this class is going to dispel any prejudices or misconceptions about what is the meaning of this blessing. Okay? So that's today. The bracha, again, just to give you a context, this blessing is said in among several others that are in which we thank God for the things that He gave us in the morning, right? Okay, so we're thanking Him for our clothes, thanking Him for waking us up in the morning, for making blind people see. We're giving a listing of things that God does for us, and one of these things among them that we're thankful for is not for a man not making us a woman. Okay, now we need to go back to the original sources and find out what do they say about this bracha, right? Because that will be the first indication of whether or not this is a negative slant against women. So the bracha is mentioned 3 times in the Gemara, okay? And the sages in the Gemara discuss this bracha as the third of a set of 3 brachos among this list that I told you of thanking God for all these things. So the first one of these 3 brachos, thanks God for not making me a non-Jew, a Gentile. The second of these brachos in this progression of 3, thanks God for not making me a slave. And the third, thanks God for not making me a woman. So just in the context of those 3 brachos, seems actually even more case of prejudice, anti-female, anti-woman. Okay. Now, the Gemara discusses it as a logical progression regarding how many mitzvos a man was given, a free male was given over the first 2 groups of people. So the first bracha that a man is thanking God for not making me a Gentile is that a Gentile has the fewest brachos, the fewest mitzvos, commandments, among these 3 groups. Right? A non-Jew has only 7 mitzvos, commandments that they are commanded to do. The Sheva mitzvos b'nei Noach, the 7 Noahide laws. Okay, so that's the first level. The progression then goes on to a slave, what we call an Eved Kanani, who is partially converted, who doesn't have any time-bound mitzvos like a woman, but also in addition to those, furthermore, lacks some other mitzvos, the commandments, so that Eved Kanani has fewer obligations than a woman, but more than a non-Jew. And finally, the third group of people is women, who again has fewer than a free man, but more than the Eved Kanani. So it's a progression of fewest mitzvos, fewer mitzvos, and fewer, up the scale, up the steps to the free man who has the most obligations. Okay? So he's thanking God for these obligations. Right? So they're expressing basically in the negative their potential to fulfill the most obligations. They're not saying that they will, but they're thanking God for the potential to do that. So they're thanking God for allowing them the opportunity to do the most mitzvos. Okay? So it doesn't have to do with lesser value. It doesn't have to do with lesser status in terms of spiritual status. It doesn't have to do with lesser holiness. It just has to do with number of mitzvos that they're ordered to do. Yeah, go ahead.
I never found that phrase or that blessing offensive, because I thought, well, I can understand why they wouldn't want to be a woman, because a woman's life is first of all the child. Bearing a child is very painful, and it's also she has many more responsibilities. Raising the children,
That is certainly one way to look at it, and certainly I'm glad that you weren't offended by it. But the original sources say that's the meaning of the blessing. Thank you for not making me a woman, has to do with the number of mitzvos, specifically with the number of mitzvos that a person. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so much of what we've talked about is how women have less obligation because we are naturally more spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's true, why wouldn't I want to be a woman? Because then I don't need all these obligations to make me that level.
Right, so correct. I'm going to answer that. Okay. I'm going to answer that. Okay, so let's go through it all, and then if you have any questions at the end, good, but I am going to deal with that. Okay, so now, you could say, I want to deal with, for a moment, with the people, the people who would still have a problem with this and say, you know what? How is this not apologetics? Or to use your term, which I never forgot from the first time you raised the question, a sop to women. I think that's what you said. A sop. And the truth is, any explanation that doesn't consider that the Talmudists, the sages in the Talmud, were misogynists is going to be explained away as apologetics. So you have to remember that the earliest texts that we have that talk about these sources, the source of this blessing, discusses this as the reason. So basically what that means is the very sages who instituted this bracha gave us a reason for it. So you can't say it's some rabbi later who said this is the reason, this is the reason. These are the original sources coming and telling us this is what it means. It's not a post facto apologetic. This is the primary and original reason that they gave. Further proof of this, is that there is a discussion in the Gemara about these three blessings. Thank you for not making me a guy, a Gentile. Thank you for not making me a slave, and thank you for not making me a woman. There's some discussion. There is a commentary. One authority has this opinion that maybe we should substitute the word ignoramus for slave. Okay, now ignoramus meaning someone who doesn't know about mitzvos or doesn't have any clue about what to do. And the discussion, the Gemara answers this idea by saying, no, that wouldn't work within the logical progression of the blessings, because an ignoramus has the same number of commandments as a free male. So given that the logic of the three blessings is to note a progression of number of commandments, it wouldn't work. Okay, so there's a little bit of further proof to have this discussion. Should we maybe say ignoramus instead? They say, no, that wouldn't work, because the meaning of the progression of the brachos is the progression upwards into number of commandments.
Okay, sorry, I just came in. So
yeah.
I didn't realize the aspect of progression. So it's
thank you for not making me a Gentile,
Oh,
because a
Gentile.
Gentile has only 7 mitzvos,
Oh,
commandments,
okay.
the Shiva mitzvos b'nei Noach, the Noahide laws.
Uh-huh.
Then thank you for not making me an Eved, a slave, meaning an Eved Kanani, which was a slave that would be partially converted so that they would be required to do certain commandments, but so there would be more than a Gentile, but fewer than a woman. And a woman who has the most in that list of 3, but still lesser than the free male who is saying the blessing. Right?
Yes.
Okay. By the way, let's just review for a moment what is this fewer number of commandments that a woman has. All right, so there are altogether 613 mitzvos in the Torah, commandments, right? Okay, of those, 365 are negative, and so a woman is required to do all of those except for a couple that have to do with not shaving a beard. That wouldn't apply to her, that sort of thing, right? Trimming a beard. So there are 248 positive mitzvos that she would be commanded to, excepting the ones that are time-bound. How many are these? About 7. Sukkah, shofar, lulav and esrog, counting the omer, things like that, right? Of those, you know today, women do almost all of it. They count the omer, they go to shul for shofar, right? They sit in the sukkah, they take the lulav and esrog. Of those 7, there are 2 that they are discouraged from doing: tefillin and talis. That's about it. So when we look at the big picture, you know, you get down to brass tacks, the differences between what we're required to do and what men are required to do are minuscule.
So, I'm sorry, I must have spaced out. So we're not supposed to do the negative ones.
No, we are we're required to follow the negative commandments, all of them, and that would be 365 of those. And of the positive, the rest of them would be 248.
And we have to do those except for 2.
Well,
We take
actually, of those 248, we have a couple of other things that just don't apply to us, like the study of Torah for its own sake, procreating. That's not a mitzvah for us, and then the rest of those are the other ones that we're exempt from are 7 time-bound ones. And again, of those, women are welcome to do all but 2, basically. So it's a minuscule difference. It's not a huge difference at all. Right. Okay, we just have to remember that as we go. Now, let's get back to this apologetics idea. In addition to what I said, that it's the meaning of the bracha is in the original texts. Almost all later sources agree. All commentaries, all sages that come afterwards agree and say this is the meaning of the bracha. There's very little disagreement as to the meaning of the bracha. Besides, I want to also posit something. If there was a negative implication that put women in a negative light or a lesser light, do you think that the rabbis of the Talmud would hesitate to say so? They say some negative things about women. Gemara says some negative things about seemingly negative things, and we can go into that in later dates. But they say wonderful, positive things about women, but they also say a couple of questionable items. And I don't get the impression that if there was a meaning inherent in that bracha that had to do with a woman's lesser status, somehow spiritual status, or the bad things about being a woman, I don't think they would hesitate to say that. Okay, so there's something that something is just basic to the idea of apologetics. Apologetics means apologizing for something, obviously, and this can only happen. You can only have an apologetic answer if you're apologizing to someone. So I want to present the historical fact of the women's movement beginning quite late, right? I would say it began in the 20th century, but I'll even give you another century. Let's say the 19th century, okay? So before the 19th century, let's say, before women had beats with any of these issues or any of these things that the Gemara was saying, before there was any movement to get up in arms about them, there was nobody that the sages were arguing against. There was nothing to apologize for, right? Which means that if an answer, an explanation in the Talmud is given that is positive, it has to be true, because there's nobody that's around that they're speaking to as an apology. That's some important thing to recognize, I think. Okay, so I think that should take care of this idea that it's apologetics when we say this, that the bracha doesn't mean, it only means the progression of mitzvos. Okay. I want to explain a few more things about this bracha that I found really interesting from several sources. So the first thing to understand about this bracha is, as I mentioned, it occurs among a list of other blessings that we're thanking God for in the morning, right? Thank you for returning my soul to me. Thank you for giving sight to the blind, for straightening the bent, for allowing me to walk, for allowing me to, we're thanking God for our basic needs. The rabbis talk about these prayers. There are four parts of our morning prayers. There's these prayers in the morning, which are called Birchat HaShachar, morning blessings. Then there's Pidukei Zimra, that the words of praise. Then there's the Shema, and then there's the Shemona Esrei. Each of these different prayers is a progression in holiness level. And it's a progression upwards in Kedusha, in matters of holiness. And the rabbis see these also as corresponding to the different, now we're getting a little Kabbalistic, different levels of worlds. And just on a basic level, the morning blessings that we're talking about here correspond to what we call the Olam HaMaaseh, the world of action. And the Olam HaMaaseh is the world that we live in, the physical world that we're stuck in, basically. It's the world in which we act out our physical needs. It's tangible, it's material. Therefore, these blessings that we're thanking God for, all of these physical elements of our life, they're thanking Him for physical reality. Thank you for my clothing. Thank you for my body, for returning my soul to me. The blessing Shelo Asani Isha, thank you for not making me a woman, needs to be seen in this context. Now, how is the blessing, thank you for not making me a woman, an element of a physicality? So what is given the explanation that I gave you, that it is a matter of thanking God for the most possible commandments. Over a woman, the issue is the time-bound commandments. Time is a physical reality, bound to this world as we are. God is above time, but time is an element of our physical world, and therefore it is in line with those other blessings that thank God for a physical reality. Okay, it's in that context. So it's again thanking God for the time-based mitzvos has its place, has its rightful place in that context. You look like you want to say something, Alice.
No, you're so
okay.
So wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
What you're saying.
Okay. Okay. In line with that, let's remember also, it's not the kind of blessing where it's not a triumphal thanks. Thank you so much for making my soul the greatest thing it is. It is more of a Baruch Dayana Emes, which is what we say, God forbid, if someone passes away, where we are recognizing that God is the true judge. Now, why do I say this? It's kind of like a child going up to his parent and saying, thank you so much for making me clean my room today. Yeah. Or a student going up to the teacher and saying, thank you so much for my extra homework tonight. Okay, it's a ridiculous idea. For that very reason, because it is a ridiculous idea, it's not a natural thing to thank somebody for more responsibilities. And that's the idea of putting this in these blessings, to make sure that we do recognize that these are privileges. These are things that I would love to not have to do them, but it makes us aware, it makes the man aware that he needs to thank God for them, because again, they are what will allow him to reach his highest potential, right? Just like chores, cleaning your messy room for a child, and just like extra homework for a student, they allow a man to reach his highest potential. And that's what we have to recognize that we're thanking Him for. Remember, this goes back to the idea that we don't believe in rights in Judaism. We believe in obligations. We don't have the sense that I have a right to do these mitzvahs, but I'm obligated to do them, right? Yeah.
Well, I just want to.
Let me just finish with
okay,
that
sure.
particular, again, because the obligation helps us get closer to God. When someone does a mitzvah, we say to him, Tiskel mitzvos. You should earn the opportunity to do more mitzvos. And this is a very strange idea in the Western world or a secular world. Imagine it would be comparable to this. I'm on the street and I have 2 bags of groceries, and I see a passerby and I say, "Oh, sir, would you help me with just open my trunk for me, I can't do it." He does it, and as he leaves I say, "Thank you so much, and may you have more opportunities to help people." It's not to us it sounds noble, but I'm thanking him by saying he should do more of this, right? It's not a natural kind of idea, but it is that is the idea that we want to make the man recognize that these are opportunities. Go ahead, what were you going to say, and then I'll go on to the next point.
Agreeing with you. Well, when I first heard about this prayer, I was talking to a female conservative rabbi about that, and she said, well, obviously you look at the text and it's, against women,
Right, sure.
So then I started asking a bunch of male Orthodox rabbis, and they were saying what you said, but in a very, they were very quiet about it. Like, it was almost like this is a stop for us, They were very quiet, like, women are more spiritual. And, we have to thank God for these extra obligations because we need them. But they put it in such a wispy way. It was almost like this is painful for me to talk about. But they all said the same thing, that, women were more spiritual, and what's not revealed in the world is much greater than what's revealed, and women are more in touch with what isn't revealed in this world, and their domain isn't the public revealed arena. Their domain is the less visible,
Correct, yeah.
Unrevealed arena, but
That's right.
It's bigger and more powerful.
Right. And more holy and more spiritual. And that actually connects to the idea of modesty very much. And we'll talk about modesty in a later lecture. Woman, the very nature of her creation was from the inside of Adam, her husband. And that the commentators, the sages note that indicates that inner quality, that inner reality that is more developed and more in tune with the holy, which is also an inner quality, because God is not revealed in this world. God, we have to seek him out. He is hidden. And so in that sense also, women have that connection. We are, we also have a more inner quality. And we'll talk much more about this when we get to the issue of modesty. Okay, I want to discuss a couple of more ideas related to this bracha. So we talked about thanking God for the privileges of the obligations. It's about obligations, not rights. I heard a nice, interesting reason from Rabbi Reuven Margoliot. He says, and this goes back to your question of why shouldn't they be thankful, or why shouldn't they be women? They would have lesser obligations. So let's think about that for a minute. Lisa's right. Women who have fewer obligations are have the same spiritual potential as men. I say potential, not reality, because it's up to us, it's up to each individual to make what they will of their potential, right? But we have the same potential, and we have, if we fulfill our role in this world, the same heavenly reward as men do. Okay? So given that reality, a man might say, well, gee, if I'm not losing anything by being a woman, if I can fulfill my holy potential by being a woman and having fewer obligations, I kind of got cheated. Why shouldn't I want to be that? Right? From a male point of view, it would be better not to have these obligations because he reaches the same reward. So the rabbis decided that he should make this declaration, so basically saying that he doesn't consider these mitzvahs a burden. That's exactly the point of the bracha, is to make sure that they're saying to themselves, no, these mitzvahs are not a burden. They are allowing me to reach the same level that the women somehow have it a little bit easier in doing. Does that answer that? Do you want to repeat what you said, and maybe that doesn't answer your question?
What I said was that we've talked much about how men have more obligation to achieve the spiritual level than women.
No. They don't have more obligation to achieve this. Well, they have more. Yeah, they.
Okay. I don't remember exactly how I phrased it before, but the argument has been that of women having less obligation is that we are on a higher spiritual level.
We have more of a natural conduit to that. Yes.
Okay. So my original question was, then why are they saying, "Thank you for not making me a man"? Why aren't they saying? I mean,
Why?
Why would they want to be more spiritual? Why would they? Is that what you said?
Well, okay. So you're saying they should really say. No, I'm not sure what it is. Well, let's go through a little bit more. Maybe
Yeah.
we'll find an answer. I'm not sure, but possibly your question has to do with the negative form of the bracha,
Yeah.
perhaps, and I'm
Yeah.
going to address that.
Yeah.
Yes, Barbara.
I think it would be, come down that earth that said, thank you for giving us our mitzvahs.
So you have the same question. Why isn't the
Exactly.
bracha? Why isn't the blessing in the positive?
Yes.
I'm going to answer that. I'm going to answer that. One more really cute reason for this bracha that I heard. Apparently, this is attributed to the Rupshitzer Rebbe. He told his wife. He explained the bracha to his wife as follows: when a man says, "Thank you for not making me a woman," he's referencing his own wife, and basically saying, "Thank you for not making me my wife, who has to put up with a husband like me." Okay, it's a cute little answer. Okay, so let's go to. I'm gonna get to the negative, but before I do that, I want to make a connection here. There's another time. This is not the only time when we thank God for extra commandments. There's one other parallel time that I want to just mention that, and that is a pidyon haben, when we make a pidyon haben. Pidyon haben means when we redeem a firstborn son. So the reason we do this is because originally God's plan was that the Kohanim, the priests in the temple and in the Mishkan, were going to be the firstborn sons of every family. Due to the sin of the golden calf, however, they lost that status. They lost that right, and that position of priest then transferred to the family of Aharon, of the Levi, and the Kohanim and the Leviim then got the job. So basically, when we redeem the firstborn, because the Kohen is standing in place of the firstborn, the boy has to be redeemed of his responsibilities, and that's what the ceremony of a pidyon haben is all about. Okay? Now, you would think that this is not something to celebrate, because number one, it reminds us of the sin of the golden calf. We never want to be reminded of our past sins. We're not supposed to remind others of their past sins. Why would we want to remind ourselves of our past sins? At the same time, in addition to that, the boy, because he is no longer going to be the priest, he has lost a little bit of his spiritual status. He's gone down in spiritual status from priest, who's on a little bit of a higher level of kedusha, of holiness, to just a stam Jew, to sort of plain, as it were, plain Jew. So you would think this is not something to celebrate. However, if you've ever been to a pidyon haben, this is a major celebration. You get dressed up in nice clothing, and we have a sudas mitzvah, a meal of a mitzvah, a fancy meal. It's a very joyous occasion. So what is that all about? We are celebrating, again, just like the bracha does. We're celebrating the fact that now this boy has more commandments than the Kohen will have, because the Kohen is restricted from doing certain mitzvahs like burying the dead or preparing the dead for burial, which is a great, great mitzvah of chesed. The highest level of chesed, of kindness that we can do is do the mitzvahs associated with the dead. He can't do those anymore. So the boy now has more mitzvahs that he's able to do, that he has the potential to do. And therefore, we're thanking God for that. Okay? So again, similarly, men are also thanking God for more commandments, because in a similar way, they recognize that they're not on the same level of holiness as women. But we're saying, thank you for the extra work that I'm going to need to reach that status. Did you have a question? Oh, okay. Now let's get to the question of why the bracha is in the negative. Why, if that's the case, it still seems very negative to say, thank you for not making me a woman. Why not just say, thank you for making me a man? Right? If I'm saying that the reason is a positive reason for the extra commandments I'm given, then why do I have to make it seem like a slur on women? Yeah, go ahead, Barbara.
I don't think it's so great for you to say thank you for making me a man.
Okay, let me hear if you can figure out the answer to that question. Go ahead. Why?
Why?
Why do you say it's not so great to say thank you for making me a man?
Because it implies, I think, a hierarchy. To me, thank you for making me a man. I'm not an
Okay.
animal, and I'm not a woman. I'm a man.
And therefore-
you thank somebody for something that's a gift, a positive. So why is it so positive
Oh, so you...
to be
yeah.
a man? Why am I thanking Hashem that I'm a man? Why
Like,
don't
women
I
could
thank
thank
Hashem?
Hashem for being a woman.
Or
We could say the same bracha and say, thank you for making me a woman.
But how about just thanking Hashem for creating me?
Again, if the meaning of the bracha is thank you for giving me the most possible commandments, that's the meaning of the bracha. So then how... And that's, again, you may not have been here for the beginning part of this, but the reason the Gemara gives for the bracha is that it's a progression of 3 brachos. Thank you for not making me a non-Jew, who has 7 mitzvos. Thank you for not making me an Eved, a Eved Knani, a slave, who has more than a non-Jew. And then thank you for also not making me a woman who has more than a slave. I have the most as a free male. So let's get to why it's in the negative. So the reason that the rabbis give is that the rabbis say that in reality it would have been better for a person not to be born. Why? Because in our soul, in our spiritual state, we're perfect. We're just all neshama. We're all soul. We're more connected to God, right? We don't leave His side, as it were, the essence of the godly essence. And once we're born, we immediately have that Yetzer Hara, that evil inclination, that natural affinity to doing sins. We have a physical body, which is the source of those desires to veer away from what we're supposed to do and what we know is right. And so it would have been better had we not been born. Okay, but once we're born, you have a question? Oh, okay. Therefore, a man cannot make the presumptuous statement to say, thank you for making me a man. Because a man, by the way, the word that's used is isha, shelo asani isha, that you didn't make me a woman, isha. We talked a long time ago about the meaning of the word isha, the connotation of the word isha, because it relates to the highest spiritual potential, higher spiritual potential than just a nekeva, which means female. The bracha could have said, thank you for not making me a female, but it says isha, meaning that really what the man wants to say is, thank you for making me an ish indicating my highest spiritual potential. He's not allowed to say this because he didn't fulfill that potential yet. In other words, you can't thank God for doing something that you didn't fulfill yet. You can't thank God. You can't say, thank you for making me an ish. He didn't make me. He didn't make us an ish. He didn't make a man an ish. He gave a potential, and it's up to the man's job to fulfill that potential. So you can't thank God for a reality that isn't there yet. That's why it has to be in the negative. That's what the rabbi said. That's what has to be in the negative. You don't know what you're going to do with that potential, right? If I say thank you God for making me an ish, and then I sin, so I'm contradicting the meaning of the blessing, right? In other words, I can't be grateful for something that I may never achieve.
What does ish mean? I thought it was man.
Yeah, it means man, but it has the connotation of the highest spiritual potential. So therefore, he can't say thank you for making me the highest spiritual thing that I am.
Thank you for giving me the potential to be an ish.
That's what he's saying by putting it in the negative. Thank you for not making me a woman. I can't say thank you for making me an ish. I'm not yet an ish. It's up to me to make that a reality. Okay, so the high level of mitzvahs he's capable of is not yet a reality. Therefore, we can't say it in the positive. Yes. I have a couple of other reasons, but go ahead.
No. So, who can possibly ever reach that?
A man is absolutely able to reach that. What we're saying is
How?
by doing mitzvahs. The point is that he can't thank God. It would be sort of like, I guess it would be like, I don't know, someone graduates from school. I don't know, call it chef school. I like to cook. That's what the first thing that came into my mind. You graduate from cooking school, and upon graduation, you shake the hand of the dean who hands you a diploma, and you say, "Thank you for making me a great cook." You're not a great cook. That's only up to you, right? So it's the same sort of idea. I can't thank God for what I have to do. That's why it has to be in the negative. A couple other reasons. Rabbi Nissim Alpert says, again, going along with this very similar idea, God doesn't define what we are. He defines what we're not. And we have to create that what we are. We have to maximize that potential. All right? We can't thank God for a debt that we may not be able to pay. So that's the idea of why the negative and not in the positive. That's what the rabbis say. Now, let's go to the women's bracha. What do the women say? As you mentioned, women say, "Thank you, God, for making me according to your will." Okay. Now, according to the logic of the progression of the brachos, where a man is thanking God for the number of commandments he has, it wouldn't make sense for a woman to say, "Thank you for not making me a man," right? If the point of the blessing is thank you for the number of mitzvos I have, then what is the meaning of thank you for not making me a man? Doesn't make sense, right? Okay. What? Right. Okay. You're agreeing with me. Okay.
No, I'm not.
You're not agreeing with me. Okay. Go ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
God gave her this capacity that she doesn't need mitzvah. That she
Right, but
reaches out
again-
without the mitzvah.
Correct. Understood and agreed. However, of the original point of the blessings, of those three blessings in particular, is thank you for the number of mitzvos I'm able to do. So she can't really say, well, thank you for not making me a man, because in reality she has fewer obligations than a man. Just a very fewer, but still fewer. Therefore, again, going back to the original meaning of the bracha, if the original meaning of the bracha is thank you for more obligations, she can't say thank you for not making me a man, because she doesn't have more obligations than him. You understand? Okay.
That's okay.
Okay.
Just go.
We'll go on. Okay. Okay. So going back to the idea of Pidyon Haben, where we're saying that a Kohen has his special mission, a regular Jew has his special mission, and they're not viewed as any less important than each other. They each have their own mission to go on. In this light, we can go back to the idea of a woman, and this connects to the idea of different roles women have, of course. So here are some explanations that are given for this. A woman was made more in accordance with God's will, because the Medrash says that when it came time for man to be created, what does God say? God says, "Let us make man." The big question of the commentators is, who's he talking to? Who's God talking to when he says, "Let us make man"? And the answer is that he's consulting with the angels. All right, and the commentators say this is a lesson to us in a way But the point is that when it came to making a woman, God did not say, let us. He did not have to consult anybody. So, in a sense, woman was created only according to his will. It wasn't in consultation with anybody else, with any other entities. And so in that way we can see that she was made more according to his will alone. Another opinion says, that Bnei Yisachar says, Hashem's original intention was to create man and woman separately. Here's man, here's woman. We know, however, that that's not the way the creation of the first human being was. God created Adam, this being that was both male and female, had both sides of man and woman, and they were subsequently separated. Into male and female. So when they were subsequently separated, when God created woman by separating her from Adam, that was more in line with what he originally wanted, what he had originally planned for. And so that was also an indication of, you created me more according to what you originally wanted. And that's why she says that bracha. In addition, there's an interesting reason given that goes back to the idea of why a woman doesn't need a bris. Now, there is such a thing as female circumcision. The question could be raised, why don't we circumcise women in the Jewish religion? They do in other religions. They do, but we don't. The Gemara says that we first have to understand that a mitzvah, if someone is commanded to a certain mitzvah, it indicates a lack. There's a lack that needs to be corrected by that mitzvah. And so the Gemara says that women do not need a bris because they are born with the accomplishments of bris. That's what the Gemara says. They are born with the accomplishments of bris. Men have a physical lack. They're born in a certain way that then requires them to do a takana, to do a fix on their body. And this has to do with the idea of subduing your physical desires to the will of God and making sure that you're in the partnership that is the body and soul. Your body knows that it is subservient to the soul, and the men have to do that. Women do not have to do that. And again, the point is that the Gemara says that women are born with that takana, with that fix. Therefore, a woman is born more in line with God's will in that way as well, in that sense as well. Rabbi Chaim Volozhin says that the way that the bracha, women's bracha, is worded, thank you for making me according to your will. According to your will, it also comes up in the prayer of Kaddish, which is, as we know, the prayer that we say for a departed soul. It says there, may his name be sanctified and exalted, B'alma dibra kurosei, in the world which he created according to his will. So basically, they are saying the highest praise possible to God when they say this bracha. All right. And again, let's remember that she is thanking God for making her different than a man. We acknowledge that, and the idea, this idea that she's different, is certainly a foundational idea when we talk about the role of women in Judaism. Now, how is she different? Well, let's discuss that. One of the ways that we just discussed how men and women are different, we talked about this also a long time ago, is in the separate gifts that they were given by God. And this goes all the way back to Genesis, all the way back to Bereshis. We know that the gift of kibush, we mentioned it several times, the gift of conquest was given to men. And the gift that women were given, according to Aaron Soloveitchik, is chazaka, which means something else. But kibush, just to review a little bit, kibush is aggression, it is outward pursuit, it is conquest, it is power, it is grasping, okay? And this was given to men as their special characteristic. This is referenced in Genesis, where it says, be fruitful, God told Adam, be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over every living thing that creeps upon it. So this gift of kibush was given to men. This is, by the way, why they have the commandment of to have kids, to multiply, and women do not, because this is a part of the idea of conquering the world, of replenishing the world, of of making future generations. Okay. The second gift that God gave to people was the gift of chazaka, chizuk, which means cultivation or connection, reaching out to people through compassion, through communication, through guidance. This particular gift is also referenced in Genesis, where it says, "And God took the Adam and placed him into the Garden of Eden to cultivate it and to keep it." Okay, and this gift was given to women and to the tribe of Levi, the Levites. Okay, this is, by the way, why it calls a woman an Ezer Kenegdo. We talked about the woman's role as the Ezer Kenegdo, the helper against him. If he deserves it, she will be an Ezer, she will be a helper. If, however, his kibush gets the better of him and gets out of control, she has to rein him in through her chazaka, through that more intuitive and communicative gift, that quality. And her chazaka can tame him, but he might view it as butting heads, as her being against him. It's the opposite quality, it's an opposite nature. Okay. Now, both qualities are necessary in the world. Both are necessary for progress. Kibush can take the form of building cities, building skyscrapers, right? Inventions, right? So we need those. They advance, advanced civilizations. That quality is a good quality to have. Even as a parent, if we look at a situation where there's a father and a mother, the father's quality of the more stricter way of doing things is necessary sometimes, where we have to force a child to do something when they don't want to do it. So it is a necessary element, right? However, out of control, we know it to be might makes right. The aggression turns into make war, conquer lands that are not yours, that sort of thing. Again, this is why the men need those extra mitzvos to tame that quality of kibush, to rein it in. Okay, so in the world that we live in, kibush needs to be connected, needs to work in tandem with chazaka. In the example I gave you of a parent situation, a father and mother, the mother is there. Certainly, we know that there are times that a mother's more guidance-directed way of teaching a child is necessary. Gentler way, right? The kind of gentler way, the TLC, is the way to, sometimes is a better way of teaching children. Sometimes you need the kibush, sometimes you need the chazaka. They have to work hand in hand. And this, by the way, why it's so important that God created a man and a woman differently, and why we believe that an ideal situation of raising a kid is to have both elements in your parents, to have the male elements and the female elements there. Okay, so we'd say that chazaka is maybe a harder way of attaining a goal, but it's more longer lasting. Kibush is easier, but it's more temporary. And again, now, as I said, today we need both. However, according to the rabbis, in the time of Mashiach, in the time of the Messiah, we are only going to use chazaka. We're only going to do things according to the women's gift of communication and chizuk, and we won't be using kibush, right? So in that sense, the divine mandate, the end goal of the world, for the world, is what the women's way of being, right? The end of time's goal is we're going to have things done women's way. In that sense, the bracha is very apt. The blessing, thank you for making me according to your will, what you consider to be the end goal, your will of the way the world should be. Yes, Barbara.
Doesn't that create the same problem with saying thank you for making me a woman? Because has she really, as a woman, really reached that height of being the way Hashem created her?
Well, I would say that's why she can't say thank you for making me a woman. That's exactly why she doesn't say thank you for making me an Isha, because Isha, again, right, she hasn't reached that goal of Isha. So that's why she would say that and not thank you for making me a woman. Today, you brought up the situation of the rabbi who was sort of uncomfortable.
Yeah, every single one that I
uncomfortably.
asked was, they weren't gung-ho the way you are, they were,
I think that part of that is that there is a suspicion that women today, or someone asking the question, is highly suspicious of the answer, and therefore it sounds like apologetics. The answer sounds like apologetics, even though I've proven that it's not. But I also would say that today, in many circles, and not just conservative, reform, or Reconstructionist, even in some Orthodox circles, there's a discomfort with this bracha. There are some rabbis who have decided, let's do things a different way. Let's have men say it under their breath so as not to insult women, which is something that some communities do. Let's change it so that it says, let's just change the wording a little bit. There are ways that people, are finding to get around it, and it's a shame. It's a real shame, because they're clearly just simply not understanding the meaning of the blessing. It goes back to that original meaning that I explained, and once you understand that as the original meaning, there's no way that you need to get insulted by the factual statement of that men have more mitzvot than women. Maybe that's what it is that they're responding to and being insulted by. I don't know, but it's just as simple as that. Are there any other questions? Comments? Yes.
so you're saying